We treat being early like it's just good manners, politeness, discipline, the kind of thing your parents praised you for. But if you actually watch someone who's always early, I mean really watch them, you'll notice something strange. They're not just on time, they're 20 minutes early, sitting in the car, scrolling their phone, watching the clock like it owes them something. And here's what's actually happening underneath all that good manners. For a lot of people, being early isn't about respect at all. It's anxiety, wearing a very well-behaved disguise. Think about the last time you were early somewhere. Not on time. Early. You probably packed your bag the night before, laid out your clothes, checked the address 3 times, and even though you already knew it. And when you finally got there, you didn't walk straight in. You sat outside, waited, watched the minutes tick down like you were counting yourself into safety. That's not just punctuality. That's a ritual. And it shows up in the smallest places too. The friend who's always the first one at the restaurant, sitting alone at the table for 2, pretending to check their phone so it doesn't look like they're just waiting. The coworker who's in the building 40 minutes before their shift starts, sipping coffee in their car in the parking lot, rather than walking in too early and looking eager. The person who sets 3 alarms for a 9 a.m. flight that doesn't board until 8:40 and still somehow feels like they're cutting it close. None of this is really about the schedule. It's about something underneath the schedule. A study published in the Journal of Personality and Individual Differences found that people high in trait anxiety are significantly more likely to arrive early to appointments. Not because they manage time better, but because uncertainty itself feels threatening to them. Arriving early isn't the goal. Removing the unknown is. But here's what's fascinating. It's not really about the clock at all. It's about control. When you're early, you get to choose the terms. You get to walk into the room before anyone's watching you walk in. You get to scope out where to sit, how to act, what the vibe is, before you're expected to perform any part of it. Lateness, on the other hand, hands all of that control to circumstance, traffic, weather, other people's timing. And if there's one thing an anxious nervous system hates, it's depending on things it can't predict. So the early arrival isn't really about the meeting, or the flight, or the dinner reservation. It's about buying yourself a buffer, a small window where nothing bad can happen yet, because nothing has technically started. Psychologists sometimes call this anticipatory control, the tendency to manage anxiety not by confronting the uncertain event itself, but by controlling everything around it instead. You can't control whether the meeting goes well. You can't control whether the other person likes you, or whether the presentation lands, or whether the date is awkward. But you can control what time you leave the house. You can control how early your alarm goes off. So that's where all the anxious energy gets funneled, into the one variable that actually listens when you try to manage it. It's a quiet kind of bargaining. If I can't guarantee the outcome, I can at least guarantee my preparation. And for a while, that bargain feels like enough. There's a deeper layer here too. For a lot of always early people, lateness doesn't just mean inconvenience. It means judgment. It means being seen as careless, disrespectful, unreliable. The kind of person who doesn't take things seriously. And somewhere along the way, a lot of us learned that being seen that way was dangerous. Maybe it was a parent who equated punctuality with love and effort. Maybe it was a teacher who made an example out of the kid who walked in 2 minutes late. Maybe it was just 100 small moments of feeling like showing up enough wasn't good enough unless you showed up early. So you adapted, you built a system, and the system works. It just runs on adrenaline instead of ease. Here's the part that gets skipped over though. Chronic early arrival isn't only about avoiding external judgment. It's also about avoiding an internal one. If you're early, you can't blame yourself for anything going wrong. You did your part. You showed up before you had to. Whatever happens next, long lines, delays, awkward waiting, none of that is on you. Being early is a way of preemptively proving your own reliability to yourself before anyone else even gets the chance to question it. That's a lot of psychological weight to carry into something as small as a coffee meetup. There's also a quieter identity piece tucked into all of this. A lot of always early people grew up being the responsible one in some part of their life. The oldest sibling, the kid who kept things together, the friend who organised everyone else. Being early becomes part of how that identity gets maintained. It's proof, in a small daily way, that you're still the reliable one. still the person who has it together, even when everything else feels uncertain. Which means showing up late doesn't just feel like a scheduling slip. It can feel like losing a piece of who you are, a small crack in the identity you've spent years building, even if no one else in the room would ever notice or care. And it's worth noticing what this does to your nervous system over time. Constantly front-loading your day with urgency, leaving earlier than necessary, rushing to avoid the possibility of rushing, keeps your body in a low simmer of alert. You're not relaxed until you've secured your spot, until the uncertainty is gone, which means a huge amount of your mental energy is spent managing a risk that, statistically, was never really that likely to happen in the first place. Think about what that actually costs day after day. The extra 20 minutes of waiting isn't neutral time. It's time spent in a low-grade state of vigilance, checking the clock, mentally rehearsing what's about to happen, running through worst-case scenarios just in case one of them turns out to be real. Multiply that across every appointment, every flight, every casual hangout with friends, and you start to see how much of a life can be quietly spent bracing for things that almost never go wrong. But here's the twist. This isn't a character flaw. It's not being uptight or too rigid, even though that's usually the label people slap on it. It's a coping mechanism that actually worked. At some point, being early protected you from criticism, from chaos, from that specific flavour of shame that comes with feeling unprepared. Your brain found a strategy that reduced anxiety, and it kept using it because it worked well enough to become automatic. That's how most coping mechanisms are born, actually. They're rarely random. Somewhere back in your history, arriving early got rewarded. With approval, with relief, with the absence of criticism you were bracing for. And your nervous system, which is very good at pattern recognition and not particularly good at knowing when a pattern has expired, filed that away as a rule. Leave early, and you'll be safe. It doesn't matter that the original threat is long gone. The rule still runs in the background, quietly steering your mornings. The problem isn't that you're early. The problem is that the system was built to manage anxiety, not to manage time, which means even when there's genuinely nothing to worry about, the ritual still runs. You still show up 20 minutes ahead of a doctor's appointment that has zero social stakes, because the behaviour isn't really responding to the situation in front of you anymore. It's responding to an old, familiar feeling that showed up decades ago and never really left. So if you're someone who's always early, this isn't a call to change that. Being reliable isn't the problem. But it might be worth noticing the difference between showing up early because you want to and showing up early because some part of you is still bracing for judgment that isn't coming. One is a preference, the other is a leftover alarm bell that never got switched off. And the interesting thing is, you don't have to dismantle the whole system to loosen its grip. Sometimes it's as small as noticing the moment you start rushing to leave the house and asking yourself what you're actually afraid will happen if you left 10 minutes later. Most of the time, the honest answer is nothing. Nothing happens. The meeting still starts on time. The world doesn't fall apart because you walked in 5 minutes before it began instead of 25. You're not rigid, you're not uptight. You're someone who learned a long time ago that showing up ahead of time was the one thing you could actually control. And in a world that often felt unpredictable, that control was a form of safety. That's not a flaw. That's a strategy that kept you okay. If this explained more about yourself than you expected, you're probably going to want to see the next one, because there's a whole other layer to this that most people never talk about. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and I'll see you in the next video.